She was only 13, too young to choose, too young to understand, but in that world it didn't matter, because what happened next was completely legal. No crime, no punishment, no one to stop it. She wasn't taken by force in the way you might expect. She was chosen by a system that turned children into tools of power and called it tradition. And once her name was spoken, her life was no longer her own. Started like any other day. She woke up in a familiar place, surrounded by the small, ordinary details of her life. At 13, her world was still simple, shaped by routine, family, and the quiet rhythm of growing up. But that normal life didn't last. By midday, everything had changed. Men arrived, officials, elders, or figures of authority. Their presence alone was enough to silence the room. Conversations became whispers. Movements became careful. Something important was happening. But no one explained it to her. Not clearly. She was asked to stand, observed, evaluated, not as a child, but as someone being considered for a role she didn't understand. Her age didn't protect her. In fact, it was the reason she had been chosen. In that society, this wasn't unusual. It was part of a system that had existed for generations. A structure where power, alliances, and status mattered more than personal choice. To them, this wasn't wrong. It was expected. Her family stood nearby. Some looked proud. Others looked uneasy. But no one stopped it, because refusing could mean consequences far worse. So silence filled the space. And just like that, the decision was made. She was selected. Her life, from that moment on, would follow a path already decided for her. One shaped by rules she didn't create, traditions she didn't question, and a future she couldn't escape. As preparations began, she realized something slowly, painfully. This wasn't temporary.
This wasn't a visit. This was a transfer of her entire life. And once it started, there was no going back. The place they brought her to was nothing like her home. It was larger, quieter, controlled. Every movement inside it felt deliberate, as if the walls themselves were watching. Long corridors stretched endlessly, lined with doors that stayed closed. Voices were low, footsteps were measured. This was not a place for children, but she was no longer treated like one. The moment she entered, everything about her began to change. Her clothes were replaced with garments that carried meaning she didn't fully understand. Her name was spoken less, her role was spoken more. She wasn't asked what she wanted, she was told what she was expected to become. Other girls were there too, some older, some younger, all of them quiet. They didn't ask questions, they didn't resist. It was as if they had already learned something she was only beginning to understand, that survival here meant silence. She watched them closely, how they moved, how they spoke, how they avoided attention unless it was demanded. And slowly, she began to copy them, because instinct told her one thing clearly. This was not a place where mistakes were forgiven. Days passed, though she couldn't always tell how many. Time felt structured, yet distant. Everything was controlled. When she woke, when she ate, when she spoke, even what she thought began to change. The rules weren't written down, but they were everywhere. Unspoken, unquestioned, absolute. And the more she observed, the more she realized something deeply unsettling. This system didn't just control actions, it controlled people. It reshaped them. And if she wasn't careful, it would reshape her too. At first, the rules felt invisible. No one handed her a list. No one explained them clearly. But they were there, in every glance, every silence, every consequence. And the longer she stayed, the clearer they became. Speak only when spoken to. Never question authority. Never show fear, even when you feel it. The smallest mistake didn't go unnoticed. A wrong word, a delayed response. Even the way she stood could draw attention. And attention was dangerous. She began to understand that this place didn't need chains or locked doors. Control came from something far more powerful. Fear, not loud, obvious fear, but quiet, constant pressure. The kind that lives in your mind, the kind that makes you think twice before every move. The other girls had already adapted. Their expressions were calm, their voices controlled. They knew exactly how to exist without causing problems. So she learned. She practiced silence. She adjusted her posture. She watched everything. Because survival here wasn't about strength, it was about control. Controlling what you said, what you showed, even what you felt. But the hardest part wasn't following the rules. It was losing herself in the process. The things that once made her who she was, her thoughts, her reactions, her sense of right and wrong, began to fade. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, until one day, she realized something that terrified her more than anything else. She wasn't pretending anymore. She was changing, becoming exactly what they wanted her to be. And once that happened, there might be no way back. At some point, everything became clear, not all at once, not in a single moment of realization, but slowly, piece by piece, until the truth could no longer be ignored. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't training. This wasn't something she would simply leave behind one day. This was her life now. She began to notice things she hadn't understood before. The way certain doors were never opened. The way some girls disappeared and never returned. The way everyone avoided speaking about what came next. There were no explanations, because none were needed. Everyone already knew. And now, so did she. Her role in this system wasn't just about obedience. It was about becoming part of something much bigger, something built on tradition, power, and control. A structure that had existed long before her and would continue long after. That was the most terrifying part. She wasn't special. She was replaceable. Just one among many. The fear didn't come from what might happen. It came from the certainty that it would. She tried to hold on to who she used to be, memories of her old life, her family, her childhood. But they felt distant now, like they belonged to someone else. And in their place, something new had taken root. Acceptance. Not because she wanted to accept it, but because resisting it felt impossible. And in that quiet acceptance, something inside her shifted. Because once you stop fighting, you don't just survive the system, you become part of it. By the time she understood everything, it was already too late. The world she once knew felt distant now, like a memory that didn't belong to her anymore. The girl she used to be, the one with choices, with innocence, with a future she could shape. She was gone. In her place stood someone quieter, controlled, careful, exactly what the system needed. She no longer asked questions, no longer hesitated, no longer resisted, because she had learned the truth the hard way. Survival here didn't come from fighting. It came from adapting, from becoming invisible when needed, and perfect when expected. Days turned into months, months into years, and slowly, she became what they had chosen her to be, not because she wanted it, but because she had no other way to exist. The most disturbing part? From the outside, everything looked normal, orderly, structured, even respected. Because in that society, this wasn't seen as cruelty. It was seen as law, as tradition, as something necessary. And that's what made it so terrifying. Not just what happened to her, but the fact that no one stopped it. No one questioned it. No one tried to change it. Because when something becomes legal, it stops being challenged, even when it destroys lives. And in the end, her story wasn't unique. There were others before her. There would be others after. Different faces, same fate. All chosen, all silenced. All part of a system that never needed force, because it already had something stronger. Acceptance.